To say Nintendo has created some of the most iconic, important, and quality video games of all time is one hell of an understatement. Over 40 years of pushing the limits on what video games can be as a medium. And they also made ARMS. Can't all be winners. But it's clear that if you've been around the block long enough that there's sort of tiers of importance when it comes to Nintendo's IPs and franchises. There's the four pillars: Mario, Zelda, Pokemon, and Animal Crossing. These are your guaranteed system sellers, your big boys. Then there's your all-stars, your solid titles that, if need be, can be trusted to sell but aren't quite as big. These are your Metroids, Kirby's, Donkey Kong, Splatoons, Fire Emblems, and Pikmins. Respectful franchises that have their die-hard fans, but also aren't everyone's cup of tea. Then there's the freaks. Nintendo's forgotten children. The misfits, the black sheep, the chibi robos. These franchises either underperform, are forgotten by Nintendo, or usually both. That doesn't take away from their quality, though. Everyone has a C-tier Nintendo franchise they'll put their dignity on the line by rooting for. Me, personally, Pikmin used to be my favorite Nintendo glup shitto, but has definitely been elevated to the next level with Pikmin 4 selling crazy well and being critically acclaimed. Some other highlights are F-Zero, Nintendo's hardcore racing franchise that hasn't gotten a major entry in 20 years, Punch-Out, Wario Games, Golden Sun, and Earthbound. But the one C-tier franchise with possibly the most entries and most interesting history is Star Fox. Despite never being that big of an IP for the company, Star Fox as a series has some of the most die-hard Nintendo fans rooting for it to succeed. Now, I'm not one of these people. I've played a total of one Star Fox game in my life, and it just so happens to be the worst one. There's 8 mainline games in the series going back to the early 90s, with the first 2 being considered the best in the franchise. So I want to figure out what all the hype is about, starting with Star Fox for Super Nintendo, released in 1993. One of my least favorite things online reviewers do is go over things that don't really matter. Like, I don't care about the plot of Star Fox, but I feel compelled to mention it, so I came up with a solution. Outsourcing to my Nintendo superfan cousin. Hey everybody, it's me, the Nintendo Dude, your one-stop shop for all things Nintendo, except for Fire Emblem. Today we're talking about Star Fox, Nintendo's exciting rail shooter using the Super FX chip to produce 3D graphics on the Super Nintendo. Take control of Fox McCloud and his Star Fox crew to stop the evil scientist Andros and save the Lilac system. Alongside Fox, there's his teammates. Falco is so cool, Peppy is wise, and boy oh boy do I feel like the slippy toad of my family sometimes. What it may lack in fancy graphics, it makes up for in good old fun. So I give Star Fox for SNES an official Nintendo Dude rating of 10 barrel rolls out of 10. Oh, fuck. Alright, enough. On to the actual review. The first thing anyone playing this game will notice is the graphics. They're rough. Granted, for the time, they were revolutionary and very impressive, bringing, pseudo-polygonal gaming to home console a few years before the N64, PlayStation, or even the Sega 32X add-on. That doesn't stop it from looking like ass, though. Yeah, the game is not a looker, which usually I don't mind. I am a Nintendo fan, after all. But it has a direct effect on the actual gameplay experience. Objects and enemy projectiles can straight up be hard to tell at times, which is not what you want for a fast-paced action game. It really contributes to the learning curve. You can get used to it, however, after a few runs, memorizing the levels and all that, which is part of the replay value. So while the graphics aren't ideal, they aren't quite as game-breaking as they may seem. The performance, however, yeah, there's no upside. The game will lag in the more intense moments, and it's borderline unplayable when it gets like that. The music and sound department, on the other hand, has held up tremendously. It really carries the presentation of the whole project. Between the sound of your laser and the enemy ships blowing up, every hit in this game sounds ultra satisfying. The music also really contributes to the whole feel of the game. Like, yeah, the grand score helps make it feel like you're really in a war. A Star Wars. However, it's the core gameplay that has been the most lasting part of Star Fox. It's weird how much Nintendo would try with later games to completely change the gameplay, because the core rail shooting and dogfighting mechanics are a very good foundation. No wonder they keep remaking the same game over and over. You fly around, you shoot enemies, and you use your barrel roll to evade attacks, with each level ending in a boss fight. There isn't much in terms of variety, a few power-ups and some tight hallway sections where your reaction time is tested, but that's about it. Which is fine because it isn't a very long game and the whole thing controls exactly how you want to. I have no complaints with how the game feels. I mean, your ship leans a bit on the loose side, but I prefer that over it feeling sluggish or unresponsive. The boss fights aren't anything special, but so are most boss fights from this era of gaming. It's all about dodging the attacks and finding the weak spots. The Andross fight stands out as probably the most iconic part of the game, even though I don't know what the fuck I'm looking at. I guess the Super Nintendo didn't have 3D monkey graphics yet, so instead we get a big ol' flat face and a cube man? You're not alone, however, because you have your 3 teammates. Though, honestly, you might as well be. You can't play as any of the other 3, and they don't take out enemies for you. Instead, they essentially serve as an extra little challenge in the middle of the level. Enemies will sometimes focus on them instead of you, so you have to multitask at times. Do you focus on saving your teammates, leaving you vulnerable to enemy attacks, targeting you, or do you prioritize your own safety, leaving your teammates at risk of being taken out, which won't affect whether you beat the level, but it will affect your high score at the end, which you want to keep high so you can get continues in case you run out of lives. It's a relatively low amount of added strategy in the grand scheme of things, but it adds enough risk-reward decision-making to keep the levels from just being a button masher. What's actually my favorite part of the original Star Fox, however, is how the game handles difficulty and replayability. See, Star Fox lacks a traditional difficulty selection. Instead, you're presented with 3 paths to get to the final boss. These paths scale in difficulty, but are also entirely different levels with their own designs and boss fights. This doesn't just make the difficulty curve more unique, but actually encourages you to go after these harder challenges to get the full Star Fox experience. These alternate paths plus the high score system turns the game from a fun hour-and-a-half experience to a challenging pursuit of mastery, and honestly, it works for me. I played through this game 5 different times across the different routes, so much so I ended up putting about 10, or I guess 8 hours into a game that takes 90 minutes to beat. The game, it just kind of sinks its teeth into me and made me come back to it multiple times. It's that replay value that I think makes this game a classic. It makes it a fun time to this day. So I think I'm going to give the original Star Fox for SNES a 6 out of 9. Star Fox sold a shit ton of copies, being the 10th highest selling game for the Super Nintendo. And if we take away the Mario and Zelda titles from those 10, it jumps all the way up to 5th. This almost immediately established Star Fox as a Nintendo All-Star, along with the other new franchises of Donkey Kong and F-Zero, meaning Fox McCloud's team would be showing up again in a sequel that was released for the Super Nintendo in 2017. Yeah, this is a weird one. So the game was pretty much completely made, but never released, as Nintendo switched their focus to the N64, with plenty of Star Fox 2's ideas being transferred to later entries, like Star Fox 64 and Star Fox Assault. Part of the reason this game was never released later down the line is Nintendo was having a hard time emulating games that use the Super FX chip, so Star Fox 2 and Yoshi's Island were absent from all SNES Virtual Console releases for decades. That's right, man. This was too complicated for the Wii U. Finally, Star Fox 2 would be re-released for the SNES Mini in September of 2017, along with a port to Nintendo Switch Online, which is the version I'm playing. First thing you notice in this game is that it generally looks a lot better. It's still got that pre-N64 3D stank to it, but for the most part, it runs better, the models look a bit more detailed, and it's much easier to understand what all is going on. The other thing you'll notice is that this is a completely different game from the original. Gone are the on-rail shooting linear levels, and instead Star Fox 2 plays much more like an action-focused RTS game. The setup is Andros is invading Corneria, putting the Star Fox crew on the defensive. Fly to enemy planes to take them out, or target missiles heading to Corneria. If either you or Corneria die, you lose, and you win by clearing all the enemies off the map and defeating Andros. The whole thing kind of plays like a big board game, and the game technically lasts less than an hour if you're good. It's a pretty simple gameplay loop, but it is extremely replayable. There's a lot of strategy and variety within a game of Star Fox 2. Sometimes you'll have enough time to target enemy bases, sometimes you'll have your back against the wall scrambling to defend against multiple attacks on your home planet, but that's only the first part of the gameplay, the second part being the actual R-Wing fighting, and this is where my problems with the gameplay loop come in. See, instead of being on rails, Star Fox 2 combat is in a fully 3D space, and boy is it annoying. Boss fights where you're just taking on one enemy, whether it's a Star Wolf member or a giant robot space dragon, it's manageable and it's a pretty exciting dogfighting experience, trying to position yourself and dodging enemy attacks. But as soon as you're targeting multiple weaker enemies, things can get annoying with you flying around in circles till you can get a shot. It's just not very fun and feels more like filler or busy work than anything else. The planet and battle carrier sections are, on the other hand, much more enjoyable. Landing on a planet and figuring out how to unlock the core, and then going through hallways shooting enemies to get to the core to blow up, it's a fun gameplay experience that carries the bulk of the whole package. It introduces the Walker, which I believe would take till like Star Fox Zero to be reintroduced. And I don't know if this is a hot take, but I like it. It uses tank controls and auto-aiming, which for some is a deal breaker, but I think it works fine for this game. Overall, the core loop of the game is fun and highly replayable, with a high score system that rewards how quickly you can clear out objectives. Star Fox 2 is filled with just a bunch of ideas that they throw at you, and for me, most of them stick. It's aged like Star Fox, but unlike the original, the formula hasn't really been replicated in future games, which I think is a shame. Would love Nintendo to tackle this style in a future Star Fox game, but I doubt it will happen because Nintendo kind of likes to keep one franchise per gameplay style, and Pikmin seems to have taken over as Nintendo's go-to real-time strategy franchise. So I think I'm going to give Star Fox 2 a 7 out of 9. Both original SNES Star Fox games set the standard for the identity of the franchise, with two aspects that I think really capture what Star Fox is to Nintendo. Both games push the hardware they're on and aren't afraid to experiment with different gameplay styles. Star Fox would keep this spirit of experimental game design going forward with shaky results. We'll get to the weird games in due time, but next time we'll be talking about the big one, the generational defining entry, Star Fox 64. See you guys next time.